You can start the live streaming as well. Namaste to all of you. A very warm welcome to this evening's call. Friends, it is a pleasure to have all of you on this evening's call. Like always, we have now crossed 60 calls after the lockdown, and it's been a wonderful time in spite of the hardships that we are all facing. We've had some great speakers coming on our call, talking about some wonderful things, and we are all enriched in this lockdown period. And I'm sure once the lockdown period ends, we all go back to our routines, but then these experiences of having heard so many stalwarts and experts on their respective fields is going to stay us in good stead. Friends, today we have Dr. Anand Kumar Ji. He is Managing Director of Indian Immunologicals Ltd. Before I formally introduce him and the topic of today, let me briefly introduce about Pragna Bharati. Pragna Bharati, friends, for those of you who have not heard this before, those of you who have come for the first time, it's probably important that we introduce ourselves. Pragna Bharati has been founded 28 years back by 5 stalwarts. Dr. Tripuraneni Hanuman Chaudhary Ji is a Padma Shri awardee. Then Ram Madhav Ji, who is currently the National General Secretary of BJP. And then B.S. Sharma Ji. Then 2 senior intellectuals who are no more with us, Vakati Panduranga Rao Ji and Harihara Sharma Ji. These are the 5 people who founded this organization 28 years back, with a view to providing a nationalistic forum for thinkers, for intellectuals. The space of the intellectuals was being hijacked by people who didn't have the best interests of the nation, and their narrative was gaining ground. So it was felt that a nationalistic viewpoint and their voice be heard. That was a motivation with which this was started. So we do conferences, seminars, workshops, and we go to the institutions, we go to educational institutions, we go to a lot of places. We ensure that this intellectual churning happens positively in the narration of Bharat. Friends, we also do a publication, a monthly English magazine by name Bharatiya Pragna. And I request all of you to kindly subscribe to this. You can keep in touch with our teammates, Dheeraj, Raghuji, and so many are there. They would happily help you out. Kindly subscribe to this. This is by a private circulation. This is not available in the newsstands. This magazine would contain content which normally you would not find in the news magazines, which are only focused on current affairs. But whereas articles and matter which concerns our Indian viewpoints are deeply researched and then published in this magazine. We also give an annual Puraskar by name Pragna Puraskar. The last Puraskar we gave was to Dr. Satish Reddy, who is scientific advisor to Prime Minister now. He was involved in many missile projects. Similarly, earlier we had awarded it to RVS's Avdhanluji, who is chairman of Veda Bharati, who is digitizing a lot of Vedas right now. And then somebody like Francois Gauthier and so many others. Friends, after the lockdown has started, we have been, we took about 4 or 5 days, 1 week before we understood what was happening. And then we moved on to the technical platform, and then we started using technology to connect to our people. And thanks to the technology and thanks to the cooperation from all of you, we have been successful in doing more than 60 programs till date. And we hope to continue this at least till the lockdown 4 ends. Friends, today we have Dr. Anand Kumar Ji. Dr. Anand Kumar Ji is, as I told you, is a Managing Director of Indian Immunological Ltd. Indian Immunologicals is a subsidiary of National Dairy Development Board. This is, as you all know, this is a premier board which governs the dairy industry in this country, whereas Indian Immunologicals was predominantly meant to provide immunological solutions to the dairy development industry. And from there, it branched out to providing immunological solutions to human beings as well. As we know that it's the third largest human vaccine company in India, right? Third largest human vaccine in India. Though it was originally for the veterinary part of it, but then it has branched out into this as well. So he has 25 years of experience in biotechnology, pharma industry, and he worked abroad, and he's he's worked in New Zealand and so many other places, and he's here. He is also a member of the National Biotechnology Expert Committee with FICCI and CII, and is a member of the National Pharmaceutical Committee with CII. So he is essentially, he has got a doctorate in biotechnology, and he has rich experience in what we have done. This is a success story we are all very proud of. The topic today we chose was Bharat's response to infectious diseases. So while this was a forte of big pharmaceutical companies across the globe, they used to send us vaccines at exorbitant prices, which was not affordable to a common Indian. We have this success story from Indian Immunologicals, and Dr. Anand Kumar will walk us through his experience and what they have done in this organization. We are all friends as Indians, as Bharatiyas. We are very proud of the success of Indian Immunologicals. They have produced the cheapest vaccines for many, many infectious diseases in the world. And the world is unable to understand how India is able to produce this. And another good thing is, in this Chinese Wuhan coronavirus period, they have embarked upon researching vaccines and solutions to handle this. They are going to probably come out with a solution in a 15-month period, but then they are also equipped to handle contract manufacture in case any other country develops a vaccine before them. So they have enough equipment to handle production as well going forward. And so India is in very safe hands in terms of combating and fighting infectious diseases. Friends, I take pleasure in inviting Anand Kumar to this talk, and we shall hear him. He shall make a presentation, PowerPoint presentation, and then post that we shall open it up for Q&A. Anand Kumar, the floor is yours.
Okay, good evening and namaste everyone. It is a pleasure to give a lecture on Bharat's response to infectious diseases. This is a very, very hot topic as a result, mostly because of COVID that's happening now. Briefly, before I get into the presentation, I would like to tell a few words about the company that I work for. As Giridharji said, that we are a subsidiary of the National Dairy Development Board. We were created in 1982 as a part of Operation Flood. And at that time, one of the diseases that were prevalent in the country, and which actually was a cause of decreased milk productivity, was the foot and mouth disease. And the National Dairy Development Board wanted to establish an entity that would work on a vaccine for foot and mouth disease. And that's how the company was created. And today I'm glad to tell that we are the largest producer of foot and mouth disease vaccine in the world. And in 1982, the foot and mouth disease vaccine was sold by a multinational at that time for 14 rupees. And when we introduced the vaccine in 1982, we brought down the price to 3 rupees 50 paise in 1982. And today, after 38 years, we are still selling the vaccine at 12 rupees. So every year, the government of India requires close to about 800 to 900 million doses. And if you were to calculate the kind of savings that by keeping the prices low, how much we have saved the exchequer, that's pretty great. Because outside India, the vaccine, the same foot and mouth disease vaccine is being sold for close to €2. So every dose, if you calculate for nearly 800 million doses, that's a lot of money that is saved. So our journey began from just one vaccine in 1982. Slowly we added several vaccines for cattle. Then also we introduced a lot of vaccines for sheep and goats. And we are the only company in India which also makes companion animal vaccines. And subsequently, in 1999, we were making safer vaccines for rabies in animals than what was available for humans at that time. And the safer vaccines which was available for humans at the time was again sold by a multinational company in India. So the government of India again requested IL if it could make a safe vaccine for humans for rabies. So that's how our journey transitioned from being a purely animal vaccine company into also human vaccines. So in 1999, we started work on human rabies vaccine. Again, there was a lot of skepticism about what quality would a animal vaccine producer bring to the human vaccines. But again, I would want to tell you that today we are the largest producer of human rabies vaccine in the world. Our company employs about 1,300 people. We have probably another 900 people who are on other support services. Our turnover is close to about 910 crores. We export to 45 countries and we generate an income of about 200 crores through our exports. We supply 50% to the governments, and we also have trade segments as well, which we supply across India, even to the remotest of villages, with a very good supply chain network that we have. And we have a very good R&D pipeline. We have a DSIR approved R&D center. We have more than 60 scientists working on various vaccine related projects in collaboration with the best of institutes around the world. And also we collaborate actively with some good institutes in India as well. So with these words, since I didn't know the composition of the group, I try to keep it as simple as possible. Sometimes it's so simple that people may think that it's very trivial what I'm telling, but that's because I didn't know this group before. So with this, I'll just get on with my presentation. So is it, Gandharji, is it visible?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So this is Bharat's response to infectious diseases.
Maybe you can click on the presentation mode. Yeah.
This one?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, so in my talk, I'll just mention what will be covered. We'll just briefly talk about infectious diseases. What are they? Infectious diseases, risks and complications, measures to prevent infectious diseases, general information on vaccines, our own national immunization program, vaccine manufacturing in our country, and then future vaccines being developed in our country. And then we'll just summarize with an executive summary. So infectious diseases, so they are caused by various organisms such as viruses, bacteria, and protozoans. Infectious diseases can be transmitted from person to person in several ways, either through direct contact or by consuming contaminated food or water, or by being exposed to an organism through air. They can also be caused by insects or by other animals. Direct contact includes person to person transmission or an animal to person, which is they are called zoonotic diseases. Today, nearly 70% of all emerging diseases in the world are zoonotic in nature. And it also can be transmitted from mother to child. Indirect contact is when you touch a surface that is contaminated. I mean, because today we are all familiar with this because there's so much of information that has been going around as a result of COVID about doorknobs, toilet seats, etc. Insects, mosquitoes cause malaria. There are deer ticks which cause Lyme's disease. One of the things that is happening and everybody is familiar with is global warming. And a few years back, we tried to understand what would be the impact of global warming on infectious diseases. We were told by experts that the future there's going to be a lot of insect related transmission of diseases. That means a lot of diseases which are going to be transmitted by mosquitoes. Food and water contamination is also responsible for transmission of disease. A single source can actually create havoc. E. coli and Salmonella are some of the bacteria which actually cause infection. Bacterial infections include streptococcal sore throats, UTI, tuberculosis, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, etc. Viral infections include Of course, COVID-19, dengue, chikungunya, polio, measles, rubella, JE, rabies, etc. Fungal infections also are there, such as ringworm and athlete's foot. Then again, we come to parasites, which also such as parasites which can cause malaria, trichomoniasis, toxoplasmosis, and there are also worm infestations such as Ascaris and Taenia solium. Now, when you look at risk factors and complications, in general, all are susceptible. Healthy individuals with a good immune system can overcome in a very short period of time. Children under 5 and the elderly are more vulnerable. That's because the immune system in them are either underdeveloped or they are failing. Individuals taking steroids or immunosuppressive treatment, for example, transplant patients or HIV patients who are immunocompromised, they are also highly susceptible. Individuals having certain cancers that affects the immune system are also vulnerable. Malnutrition, worm infestation, all risk factors. Certain pre-existing conditions such as diabetes, BP, especially in the case of COVID-19. The complications will vary as a result of infection. A majority are overcome in a short period of time, such as cold. Pneumonia, meningitis, HIV can become life-threatening. Some infections actually lead to cancer in the long term, such as Helicobacter pylori, which causes stomach cancer, and then human papilloma virus, which causes cervical cancer. Hepatitis B virus causes liver cancer. Now, it is well known that prevention is always better than cure. So vaccine comes under that category of prevention. Of course, if you look at our ancient methodology of medicine, which is Ayurveda, that talks a lot about prevention. So cleanliness and hygiene are paramount, especially washing hands, taking bath. I mean, there's a lot of thing about medicated soap, but generally all soaps are the same. They do the same purpose. Employees and children who suffer from fever, cold, because it's a contagious diseases that we are talking about, they should remain at home. They should not go to school or they should not go to the workplace. But generally in our country, people who sick, when they report to work, they think that they are very, very loyal to the company, and even when they are not keeping well, they are coming. But that's not a good thing, and that should not be encouraged, because he could come in, and then along with him, he could infect others in the workplace. So prepares food safely, cook well. I mean, one of the things with our type of cooking is like we excessively use cooker and all those. Generally, all the foods that we prepare according to the Indian tradition, all well cooked foods. Practice safe sex. Being selfish over personal items is okay, because some items it's better not to share even with the family. Maintaining a healthy lifestyle with good exercise and nutritious food. Avoid visits to high risk areas such as hospitals. Generally, in India, it's a tradition that whenever one of our cousins or somebody falls ill, the patient also expects that a lot of people would come and see him in the hospital. And sometimes we have had cases where if some cousin or relative doesn't come to see him in the hospital, then actually the patient gets very angry. And so, but especially in situations like this, like where the disease spread is very high, especially like in COVID, we should really avoid high risk areas. We should tend to keep the inside of the house very clean, but then generally outside of the home is just left to others like GHMC and all. But I would like to tell that actually the inside and the outside, as far as microbes are concerned, it's the same thing. So your wall and gate is never going to prevent any microbes. So your outside is also as important as the inside. All helpers, I mean, we need to ensure that all helpers who are in our house, they need to maintain hygiene. We need to give them dewormers on a periodical basis. I mean, I can tell you their health is our health, and especially if you have young children or old age people in the house, it is very, very important that you keep helpers who are very, very healthy. Stress, I mean, everybody goes through this at some point or other. Actually, it tends to bring down immunity level in individuals. Financial or emotional worries will create new, health worries. Now, if you look at various things that we have talked about, some like say wash. Today, our country is water stressed in the sense that because of the population that we have, the amount of water that's available is much less, and also getting clean, good water also is very it's a problematic thing. So vaccination is also one of the preventive measures against infectious disease, and in fact, it's the most effective intervention to control infectious diseases. Now, I'll just take you briefly through vaccines. I've just touched upon a few things. See, it's said that with the exception of safe water, no other modality, not even antibiotics, has had such an effect on mortality reduction like vaccines. Immunization is the process whereby a person is made immune or resistant to infection by administration of a vaccine. There are sustainable development goals adopted by UN in 2015. Goal number 3 is to reduce newborn mortality to as low as 12 per thousand births in every country, and reduce under 5 mortality to less than 25 deaths per thousand births. And the objective is that we should meet these objectives by 2030. Now, good progress has been made in reaching out to the various children under those age groups to vaccinate them. See, 86% of the children worldwide are covered for DTP vaccine, but still 19.4 million children are still vulnerable. Approximately of those 19.4 million, majority of them belong to Southeast Asia and Africa, and there's about 4 million in Southeast Asia region which we belong to. Infant mortality in India is currently 38 out of every 1,000 births, and under 5 mortality is 48 for every 1,000. India has the largest birth cohort in the world. Every year, 26 million children are born in India. China, there's only 15 million. So in this, though their population is much higher than in ours, but at some point this is going to change. The DTP coverage, which is a vaccine, which is a measure of how the country has addressed vaccination needs. DTP3 coverage is in about 90%. Now, this slide, I just because there's so many success stories with vaccines. So what I'm just going to just give you 2 data. One is on global vaccination coverage for various diseases. You can see for tuberculosis is 89%, measles 86%, for DTP it's 86%, for polio it's 85%. So like that, we have for pneumococcal vaccine it's only 47%, and for rotavirus it's only 35%. That's because these are new generation vaccines which were introduced only recently. Now this slide actually talks about how vaccination has helped reduce global cases of just one disease. I'll just take an example is MMR. So you see in the 1980s that it was as high as 4 million, and now it's dropped to almost very, very, very low levels. Now, there are several types of vaccines. There are inactivated vaccines. In inactivated vaccines, what we do is like we just take the organism that actually causes disease, grow them in large scale, and then we inactivate it with a chemical. And then inactivate means like we actually kill it. And we preserve all the other structural properties of that virus or bacteria that we're making. So an example of that is rabies vaccine. Then there is live attenuated vaccine. That means it's a live a virus or a bacteria, but by actually continuously growing in, we call them passages. By they lose their virulence and they have the capacity to multiply, but they will not cause any harm to us. Examples of those live attenuated vaccines are measles and rubella. Then we have recombinant vaccines, for example, hepatitis B. We have virus-like particles, which is a human papilloma virus vaccine. These are the most common. And then there are a lot of research vaccines for DNA, RNA vaccines, which are emerging, but none of these DNA or RNA vaccines are actually licensed. You would have heard that Moderna is coming out with a vaccine for COVID. That's an RNA-based vaccine, and actually it's never been licensed. There's no RNA or DNA vaccines which is licensed. The objective of a vaccine, I mean, it's everybody's dream is to give a single shot for a lifetime, but actually that doesn't happen always. the duration of immunity, that means the duration where a vaccine protects an individual, that depends on the type of vaccine. There are different types of childhood vaccine for childhood, and there are also adult vaccines. Vaccines are made through complex biological processes which require huge capital investment. And because the facility involves growing a lot of organisms, whether it's viruses or bacteria, it has to be a contained facility so that there is no accidental leak of this virus. Many of you know today that the source of the virus, that the Wuhan virus, many of them tend to think that it's actually as a result of some containment issues from a lab. And the manufacturing processes of vaccines require trained manpower. Vaccines are, it's a highly regulated industry, partly because the risks are very high. First is it's being a biological, and also it's an injectable. In general, all vaccines require cold chain because most of the vaccines have protein, and they tend to lose their potency once the temperature goes beyond 25-30 degrees. There are various stabilizers that are added to a vaccine to prevent deterioration. BVM, actually, these are kind of vaccine vial monitors, which are actually stickers pasted onto vaccine vials. So once a vial is exposed to higher temperature, then a change of color happens. So the user gets to know whether the vaccine has been maintained properly in good chain, cold chain or not. Now, as they are administered to day zero infants, and unlike medicines which are given to sick people, vaccines are always given to healthy people. So as a result, adequate and lengthy regulatory procedures are followed whenever a new vaccine is approved. Normally, it takes 7 to 10 years for approvals. Every batch of vaccine produced in India is tested by the Central Research Institute in Kasoli prior to sale. All adverse events, though adverse events are rare, have to be investigated and reported to the say CDSC office in Delhi. Vaccines are presented either as liquid or as lyophilized powders. And if it is a lyophilized powder, for example, rabies vaccine is a lyophilized powder that we make, they have to be reconstituted with a diluent. Some are administered orally. For example, rotavirus vaccine is administered orally. Then you have the oral polio vaccine, but majority are injectable. Now, there's a property that every vaccine should stimulate good amount of humoral, and humoral means antibody production, and cell-mediated immunity, and also it is expected that it should give good memory that lasts for a long period of time. Now, our national immunization program was introduced as an expanded program of immunization (EPI) in 1978 by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and it was modified as a universal immunization program (UIP) in 1985. Successful elimination of smallpox and polio. Today, you know that there are only 3 countries in the world that have polio, and India has successfully eradicated polio. By complexity, our national immunization program is one of the largest health program in the world. This program covers vaccines for 14 pathogens. We have Mission Indradhanush, which is actually, then there's there are other drivers which actually make sure that majority of the population get covered. The diseases presently covered are tuberculosis, polio, measles, rubella, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, hepatitis B, Haemophilus influenzae B, and rotavirus, JE, pneumonia, and cervical cancer. The last 2 are in limited areas. That's pneumonia and the cervical cancer vaccine, HPV, have just been introduced, and they are introduced only in limited areas. See, one may ask, like, there are over 1,000 organisms which have a potential to cause disease, and it's almost impractical to take vaccine against all of them. So that's where all the other things which come into play, such as good, good health by other means like good food and exercise, come into play, hygiene and other things. Some are given as a single shot, others are multiple shots over a period. The vaccine supplied to the program is the most economical in the world. For example, and almost all vaccines which are supplied to India's immunization program is produced by Indian manufacturers. Tetanus toxoid vaccine costs only 1 rupee 20 paise. It gives you 10 years of protection. The syringe which is used to administer that vaccine itself is 5 rupees. BCG costs 4 rupees 20 paise and it gives once in a lifetime protection. Pentavalent vaccine, which protects us from 5 diseases, is sold to the government for only 29 rupees. Measles rubella vaccine is only 38 rupees. Oral polio vaccine is 4.5 rupees. DTP vaccine is 4 rupees 75 paise. Few vaccines are also produced by the are also procured by the states. For example, rabies vaccine, the center doesn't take that as in its program, and rabies vaccine is all procured individually by the states. Vaccines other than these vaccines which are provided by the part of the national immunization program, there are a lot of other vaccines which are available in the retail market, such as the flu vaccine, hepatitis A, varicella vaccine, typhoid, hexavalent, meningococcal. Vaccine manufacturing country in our country, India is considered as a vaccine manufacturing hub of the world. Vaccines for 13 of the 14 pathogens addressed in our country's universal immunization program are produced only by Indian manufacturers. Only one is sold by a multinational, which is the HPV vaccine. India also exports quite a lot of vaccines that we produce. Volume-wise, 65% of UNICEF supplies are all produced by Indian vaccine manufacturers. Government units, initially we started with government vaccine manufacturing units, but today they're all non-significant now. Several times we have tried, but it's all failed. It's dominated by private players. Intense competition has kept the prices low. I mean, as I already mentioned, some of the prices are very, very low, and the government has benefited as a result because vaccine industry is highly capital intensive, meaning that the capacity utilization happens only when you supply large volumes to the government. So invariably in any tender, whoever is L1, you will find that the L3 will go and match the L1's price because nobody would can afford to keep their capacity idle. That being the reason, the ultimate beneficiary is the government and of course all the people. Now, pentavalent vaccine crashed from 75 rupees a dose to 19 rupees in just 4 years. Vaccine manufacturers have remained healthy, but in spite of all those, vaccine manufacturers have still remained healthy by adopting various continuous improvements, either increases in yield and other things. But now it's reached a stage where now there are concerns about sustainability, because like if the prices keep dropping so low, at some points the companies are going to give up and then find other avenues. But having said that, companies are doing that. Companies are pursuing other interests. For example, IIL is in both animal health and human health. So sometimes we have a very normal business in human health, but then that's supported by our animal health business. Biological Events is a company which has now gone into complex generics. Bharat Biotech also has increased its capital spend in the animal health. Now, as we said, other than the vaccines which are sold, which are provided by the government almost free of cost to the entire country, the trade vaccine market, if you see, the value of that is about $333 million. These offer vaccines which are not a part of the UIP and is dominated by multinational companies with limited Indian manufacturer presence. For example, multinational GSK, they sell $93 million worth every year, and the largest Indian manufacturer in retail sells only $17 million. Partly their dominance is because some of the vaccines which are sold by them are not produced by Indian companies. But having said that, a lot of Indian companies have in their R&D pipeline almost all the vaccines which are sold by multinational companies now. Multinational companies, when they sell vaccines in the retail, like they vary from few hundreds to thousands. Whenever an Indian manufacturer develops the vaccine made by the multinational, the prices crash. For example, Chiron, which is a multinational company, used to dominate the rabies vaccine market. But now, since IL introduced the rabies vaccine, now we have become the market leader. Several Indian companies have R&D capability and collaborate with the best institutes across the globe, and also few in India. We as a company, we have collaborations with the National Institute of Health in USA. We have collaborations with CDC USA. We have collaborations with the US Army, with the Bharat Institute, and also we have collaborations with the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. Our hepatitis B vaccine came from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Our biggest strength in our country is that low cost of development and also low cost in manufacturing. We are also very good in making process improvements to keep the cost very low. Unfortunately, there have been very few new vaccines totally developed in India. There's only one new vaccine in the world in the last 125 years. That's our Indian Immunologicals cysticercosis vaccine for tapeworm, which we developed in collaboration with the University of Melbourne and Galway. Indian companies are well respected for quality products, and several companies have WHO pre-qualification status. Now, with this WHO pre-qualification status, UNICEF then buys vaccines for providing to a lot of developing countries, such as those in Africa and in Southeast Asia. Most of the Indian vaccine companies are a part of our network. It's called the Developing Countries Vaccine Manufacturers Networks. And through these networks, we actually have tie-ups with various other companies from outside India. Research funding has now drastically increased in the recent years. Now the Department of Biotechnology through BioAct provides quite a lot of funds. But most of these funds, they come with a lot of riders. They say that you have to sell it at this price, a lot of things. So generally, this is the last resort that vaccine companies go to because there are so many conditions that we have to meet. Very few pharma players. I mean, we all know that pharma is pretty big in India, and but that kind of dominance is slowly shrinking because of various issues. And earlier, vaccine pharma players never ventured into vaccine manufacturing. But because of all the other issues that is happening in pharma manufacturing, including the FDA related issues and the drug price control order, now slowly some of these pharma companies are looking at coming into vaccine manufacturing. Aurobindo, for example, has bought a company called Tergene in Hyderabad. And one thing for all Hyderabad is that 4 of the 6 largest manufacturers are located in Hyderabad. Shanta, Bharat, BA, and Indian Immunologicals. Future vaccines in R&D pipeline. I've just listed some of these vaccines. Currently, pneumococcal vaccine is dominated by the multinationals, but then there are 3 Indian companies which are actually in the process of developing it. Hepatitis A, again, this is produced by a multinational, and there are some Chinese imports, but there are other companies. Dengue vaccine, there's no vaccine yet for dengue. But there are 3 companies who are collaborating with the National Institute of Health in the USA to develop one. Chikungunya, there's no vaccine in the world for chikungunya. Bharat, biotech, and IL are working on it. Zika vaccine, there is no vaccine in the world. Bharat and IL are working on it. COVID-19, there are a lot of companies in India are working on it. I've just mentioned few names. Varicella vaccine, again, 2 companies in India, Serum Institute of India and IL are working on it. So I just made a summary of whatever I've said. Infectious diseases are cause significant mortality, especially in children. Susceptibility to disease depends on the immune status of the individual. Vaccines are the most cost-effective intervention in eradication of diseases. Manufacture of vaccine is an expensive, capital-intensive affair with long lead times for approvals. India is a leading producer of vaccine, and we have self-dependence. An effective immunization program supported by cost-effective vaccines has significantly reduced infant and child mortality in the country. India is the largest supplier of vaccines by volume to UNICEF and other countries. Multinationals dominate the trade market, while Indian manufacturers dominate the government supplies. But as Indian manufacturers have a lot of vaccines under development, then this domination by multinational will slowly start reducing. Our country has all the technical expertise to manufacture in large scale any vaccine for any disease that may present us. Because even our own company, for that matter, I can tell you that we produce various vaccines for viruses, for bacteria, for protozoans, and even for, as I said, we are the only producer of the world's first vaccine for a worm. Uh, as a result, I can just tell that from a vaccine perspective, we are all very, very secure. So that's a brief.
Yeah, that was wonderful. It was quite reassuring in terms of what Indian pharmaceutical industry is doing and what IAL has been doing. But maybe why don't you throw a little more light on the challenges that you have, be it bureaucratic, be it suddenly there was this hype about hepatitis B, and they sold tons and tons of vial, while actually the scare was not that much. This whole nexus of the pharmaceutical industry, which is in US, for instance, pharmaceutical industry and insurance, that nexus is something which drives a lot of these innovations and the pricing and all that stuff. So how is India coping up with that? And, what are the challenges you are facing?
See, challenges that we face, I mean, there are multiple challenges. Like one is from the regulatory front, like any vaccine. Now because of COVID and the urgency, people are even wanting to give very, very, very speedy approvals. But otherwise, under normal circumstances, uh, it takes quite some time. It takes about at least 7 to 8 years, and there are multiple agencies involved in approvals. And for example, if you're making a genetically engineered vaccine, then you have other agencies in addition to the CDSEO which come into the picture. And if you are making an animal vaccine, you have only the Drug Controller General of India who is the approval authority, but then he has to take a lot of input from Ministry of Animal Husbandry. And so because of this multiple agencies which are involved in approvals, they take their own time. I mean, easily I can tell that whether it's a veterinary or a human vaccine in India, easily it takes 7 to 10 years. That's one. The other challenge is like you build capacity. It's very, very capital intensive. So like you need to spend several hundred crores to create a facility. But then once you do that, your biggest procurement agency is the government. So if you participate in tenders and for some reason if you're not the lowest bidder, then the whole facility, including the manufacturing people and equipment, tend to remain idle. So rather, the procurement agencies should manage it in a better way, where they say that like everybody should be given. Otherwise, what would happen is that if there are like say 8 companies, and then there are only 2 or 3 which do very well, then slowly the 5 will tend to move out of this business, and then these 3 will have a fantastic opportunity to hike up the price, or they should manage it in a better way. The other thing is like getting industry ready manpower in our country also. There is a big gap between what the people that come from the university. Normally in our company, it takes us at least 1.5 years to even get them industry ready, because they are not familiar with a lot of practical things. So that's another. So initially, 1.5 years of any new recruitment, that's gone training him only. That's another. The other thing is that there are quite a lot of imports that we have to do in terms of raw materials and also capital equipment. And sometimes like these dependents also gives them an opportunity to keep increasing the price frequently, and that's one of the reasons why we created a subsidiary in New Zealand called Pristine Biologicals Ltd, just to manufacture a very key raw material which we are using for our vaccines. Yeah.
So, how do you measure up to the rest of the world? While you said we are safe, secured, and we have enough vaccines, let's say in comparison to, let's look at least the major two comparisons. One is China, and second is the white world, Western world, in terms of US and Europe. How do we measure up?
In terms of cost, there's no comparison to India's prices to any country in the world, in terms of volume and in terms of cost. So in terms of innovation, like that's what I was saying, that when somebody develops a vaccine in the Western world, we are very good at making another version of it here at a very, very low price. But for that, to develop a totally new vaccine, then we need to get a lot of support from the academia. But that kind of academia industry, collaborations which are happening in the Western world seldom happens here. So that's the reason why we would never almost develop a new vaccine by ourselves, because the initial academic research has to come from some reputed institutes.
So the lack of
likewise, I'll tell you, like this DPT vaccine which you are supplying to the government at ₹4.75 in America it's $38. So for 100 million doses a year, if it is $38 that we have to buy that vaccine for use in India, then probably very few children could get vaccinated with that vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to name the pharmaceutical company, but there was this case in India where I think Supreme Court rejected their, petition where they challenged the indigenization of some Indian company. There is some medicine which they developed, which was, I think, annually it was costing about $45,000 or $50,000, whereas in India it was costing $1,400, and they filed for challenging that Indian manufacturer, that you are violating my patent. But the Indian Supreme Court said, I don't care, this is serving the larger good here. And so there was a huge debate in the US. I'm sure you know about that company, you know what it is all about.
See, it was discussed. One thing that plays to our advantage, I mean, may not be the right way to describe this as an advantage, is that, see, generally, other than COVID, if you see, like, majority of, I mean, of course, flu, COVID, if you look at a lot of other diseases, they are all prevalent mostly in the developing world. So even if Harvard or Oxford or whatever they develop, various academically, they have to come to our kind of places to translate whatever the development is into a product, because ultimately the use is here. So I remember there's a company in Germany whom we were talking to get monoclonal antibody technology for rabies. So initially they started saying that the technology would be $5 million and that and this, and because they have no use of that technology in their country because they don't have rabies there. So we told that with those kind of money we could just never afford and then make a product and sell it at low prices in India, and ultimately that $5 million they gave it away to us for $100,000 in October because they have no use of it.
So that is the issue. I think they, I think this,
and I think they would not, I mean, a lot of these Western countries and multinational, like say, for example, they will not venture into in disease areas which predominantly affects the developing world, and because they know the price of vaccines in those parts.
Okay. How about China? How do we compare, measure up with China?
Of late, since Margaret Chan became the Secretary General of WHO, there's been a significant improvement in China. And I mean, they have a program. They have more vaccines in their national program than what we have. That's partly because they have other diseases which we don't have. Now, in terms of quality, earlier it used to be nondescript, but now slowly I think they're improving.
So is it something like us, which is original research, or largely they are picking it up from the US, which is what the popular narrative is all about, right?
They're also like predominantly picking it up from the developed countries.
Yeah. So it's not their original stuff.
No.
Yeah. So in that sense, I think what we potentially can do is probably quite different from what they're doing, right?
True.
So you told me about this difference in the government policy with regard to rabies vaccine versus vaccine for the dogs. Maybe you want to say that again.
Yeah, we are the largest producer of both animal rabies and human rabies vaccine. Animal rabies vaccine is less than 10 rupees a dose. Human rabies vaccine is about 350 rupees. But we seem to sell 20 million doses of the human rabies vaccine and only 3 million doses of the animal rabies vaccine. So rabies is transmitted from predominantly dogs to humans. But for some reason, we seem to allow that to happen and pay a higher price for a human rabies vaccine than pay less than $10 and vaccinate all our dogs.
10 rupees or $10?
So that's a policy that somebody and moreover, now, see, earlier it used to be clearly demarcated as Ministry of Health means only human health. Ministry of Animal Husbandry means only animal health. But these days, as I told, 75% of all emerging diseases are zoonotic in nature. That means they come from animals into humans. So the government should adopt a One Health policy pretty quickly. Otherwise, it's just going to fall right in the middle. I mean, we had our own experience. I told you when we developed the world's first vaccine for cysticercosis. Cysticercosis is against tapeworm. Tapeworm is responsible for 50% of all epilepsy cases in humans. But the vaccine is to be administered in pigs. So when we went to Ministry of Animal Husbandry, they said this is a human problem because epilepsy is in humans. But then when we went to Ministry of Health, they said that this is a intervention is in the animal, so it is the Ministry of Animal Husbandry who take care of. So the other funny part is they will ask, has it been introduced anywhere in the world? So I don't know, maybe several decades ago, there was this feeling that we were all our country was like an experimental ground for various Western inventions, or so that fear that we wouldn't use anything first unless it's tried and tested somewhere elsewhere.
So how do you see this happening now? I mean, did these recommendations go to the government? What was the governmental response?
Now, actually, after COVID, because they realized that they have to focus on One Health, I just recently saw that they have established a committee to expert who will just frame the policy work for One Health in our country. So that's good.
Okay. Okay. So and then how do you rate? I mean, this Chinese Wuhan coronavirus. What is your gut feel, or whatever you have studied? What is your assessment of it? Did it really come by some Chinese eating a bat, or is it a lab test gone wild? How do you? I mean, the mutations, what you are seeing technically pan through across the globe. What is your feel about this?
See, I read both the sides on a daily basis. So I have a lot of people who have said that it's not from the lab. Then there's a lot of other things from that it's from the lab. And but even if it's of natural origin, for it to happen in Wuhan, where they're doing a lot of this research, that's what the thing that but anyway, I think there's a WHO has asked for an investigation on the origin of the virus, and I think slowly we'll start to get to know about this more.
How come you are so confident about China sharing information where they've already destroyed the samples? Right? Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. I think we'll leave it there. I think, you don't want to get into a professional rivalry between these two. But I think the large feeling about people is that it has come from the lab, because Chinese eat bats everywhere. You name it, Beijing, Guangzhou, you name it, all cities they eat. And why should it come only in Wuhan? That is a question I don't think Chinese have an answer for right now. So how do you see this panning out? Would this, even after the vaccine is discovered, how does it pan out over a period of time?
Positive happening. I mean, see, it is not as bad as what we thought it would be. Not only in our country, but like say, for example, Australia and New Zealand almost like 0 cases. New Zealand has 0 cases in the last 5 days. Australia also has significantly. There are quite a lot of countries where the number of in China, I mean, they say that the cases are almost 0 there. And in fact, the COVID vaccine, there are 2 companies in China which are in very, very advanced stage for the COVID-19 vaccine. But the problem is they are not able to do the last step in vaccine approval, which is a phase 3 clinical trial, because there are no instances of COVID-19 in China. Because you would want to test your vaccine when there is a high incidence, then only you'll be able to ascertain whether the vaccine protects or doesn't protect. So UK is going through the same problem. They're also worried that by the time the Oxford vaccine comes into phase 3 clinical trial, there won't be this disease in UK. So in a way, it's good that whatever steps that have been taken by various countries, that this has to an extent, like even in our own country, if you see the number of deaths, it's just as a percentage to the population, it's very, very less.
Yeah.
So I think that over a period of time we should be okay. I mean, as they say, we will learn to live with it.
So the life, I was coming to that. How do you see the life cycle of the virus itself? Would it continue for a few years now, or natural immunity in humans are going to develop and then it'll kind of fade off? How do you see the trajectory of it, assuming that vaccine is going to take some more time?
See, the one good thing that with this virus is that it's not mutating as much as originally we expected that it would do. So that's a good sign, because if it is not mutating, then a vaccine is a very, very, very good tool to eradicate it. Another thing is that see, unlike the flu virus that we have now, that actually mutates quite a bit, and that's why every year the viruses used in the flu vaccine keeps changing. So given that this time period has elapsed, and also the fact that SARS-1, if you see, it just came, but of course it didn't infect as many people as the SARS coronavirus 2 did. It just came and just vanished in pretty quick time. So, I mean, we just, the indications are that it is, at one point, it looked like the entire humanity would be under, what would happen to this entire population in this world with this rapid attack that was happening. But now, I think there are a lot of parts within the globe where there's no incidence of any COVID-19 in the last few weeks. So that's a good sign. So humanity will survive.
Okay. And what about these arguments given by the Westerners that we've traditionally we had malaria and we have so many other diseases, and we took a lot of whatever vaccination in our childhood. So that was the cause. That was the reason why India had low mortality compared to the West. Is there any base on that argument?
There's a hypothesis saying that the BCG vaccine that we took during childhood, because that's a vaccine which stimulates quite a bit of innate immunity, and it's a non-specific immune response that vaccine creates. So I mean, it's all unproven, but I think there's a study which is going to start in India also pretty soon on testing that hypothesis.
Okay. But why do you think this has affected some countries more than the other countries? In Asia, we have a very similar kind of population, but then it hardly affected Bangladesh, for instance. Bangladesh is more or less free from that. And it hit India in some measure, Pakistan, and Iran was the worst hit. While the general, population DNAs and our structuring, our lifestyles are similar, why is it that this kind of a massive disparity we see? Forget about the governmental response, but even the impact, the spread, fatalities again are different in these
One
things.
thing that is always a big headache and which is actually a nightmare for any company in this is that the epidemiology and surveillance. It all depends on the number of tests that are being done. So if you don't test, then you have zero case. If you test, then you have case. So the number of cases, I think that's all depends on the quantum of testing that is done.
Okay, fair
So,
enough.
for example, if some countries, if they have not done enough testing, actually the mortality deaths as a result of COVID, that should be the most important criteria to determine than the cases that are.
Even that these countries hardly have recorded the deaths to be due to COVID. Many deaths they did not even
This is
register
the
it.
problem in, I mean, not everything that is reported is actually true. Not everything that is unreported is also not.
Yeah, sure. Let's throw it open for Q&A now. We'll start with Tulsi Tawariji. You can unmute, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Giridharji, and for a great talk and follow up beautiful questions that you raised, and a lot of insight came out. I have two questions actually, but they are not necessarily about vaccination. But because you are dealing with systemic issues, the two systemic issues came to my mind, which you are personally familiar, it seems, and you can throw light. Number one is about that contract issues you talked about, is L1, L3, and this if this methodology is not corrected, many private players may go out of this business and things like that. Now that trauma happens in the defense industry also, in all government sector. And now why I raised this is because I was discussing with some senior people in one of the government divisions. And suppose there is an honest officer in government, they also are worried, when they're dealing with the private sector, that if they don't worry about L1, L3 and all, personally they will be charged about as if they have hands in gloves with the private party and all that kind of thing. So this, because this is holding, why is this question is very, 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 very important, is that this is preventing knowledge, technology, science professionals, Indian professionals from other countries also, to become entrepreneurs in India, because their chances of success are low in India, because all this L1, L3, the quality goes haywire and all that. So I want your take on that, that could there be a conflict resolution mechanism or something new that can be done, so that the honest government officers have a track record, and they are never afraid about that who is going to charge them about about any kind of hanky panky, and they are able to take better decision. This is my first question. Please, I have taken a little time to explain. Sorry.
Sir, this is, as I said, majority of the tender conditions are all predominantly one-sided. We earlier used to have tenders which doesn't even tell the time period that the tender would end. It would just talk about, and some tenders where even the quantities are not mentioned. So you would think based on previous year's procurement that this state is going to buy X quantity, and then suddenly that year you will find that they buy 10 times more, but you have to supply it because that's the part of the contract, and If you don't, then they deliver. I mean, you have to pay late delivery charges. And there's a. I mean, this is a topic by itself, sir. Actually, it's a very big discussion topic.
I know.
You know, historically, the belief was that everybody who's supplying has some vested interest, and I think that trust slowly should come on vendors and also the thing is that to buy everything at the lowest price. I mean, you should leave something in it for them to sustain, right? I mean, they also have to spend money on R&D. They also have to bring some new features to the products. So I think some kind of a holistic approach to the tendering process should be done.
Yeah,
This
I
is a
mean,
topic,
we need a. I think in defense, the first thing they did was they cut off the middlemen. It is now a government to government deal they have introduced in many big ticket items at least.
No, but Giridharji, with regards to the Indian technology entrepreneurs, it is a really a very painful process to go through this tender with a commitment of, so integrity is questioned and all that on both sides, in private as well as
True,
in government. And that is preventing the high-end enterprising in India to succeed.
Yeah,
high-end, where you're talking about original work, original technologies, you know.
Yeah.
And this area needs attention.
Yeah.
I'm holding my second question. I think there are maybe many other people. So
Sure. I mean, this has its own cascading effects. Your funding, suddenly you're called you're treated as an NPA by the banks.
Yeah.
And then the tax guy comes in, he swoops in, he says, you know, tax terrorism. I mean, I think one of the calls that we had, one of the speakers said, if you're done. You're a startup in India. You deserve a Nobel Prize. He said.
Yeah.
It's not easy at all.
Enterprise infanticide, actually. You know,
I mean, they have other funny clauses like 3-year market standing and all those. So I mean, you develop something and then you have to sit out in the market for 3 years till you establish, and that market standing also doesn't have any relevance. You have to sell only 1 unit per year, and that's still considered as market standing.
It's
ridiculous. Yeah.
I think most of these Nehruvian policies need to be thrown out into the bin, and then we need to look at something afresh.
It's high time it happens. Giridharji, do something about it.
We can only go and shout, sir, but the people who want to do are not listening. That is the problem. Anyway, we'll keep shouting. Yeah. Thank you. Srinarayan ji, please go ahead, sir.
Namaste ji, I'm Dr. Gauri Shankar. Hello.
Yeah, Gauri Shankar ji, ask please.
Yeah. So actually, the thing is, my primary question is, because I'm a doctor, I'm more concerned with the vaccination. How much time it will be taking to the vaccine be introduced in India? That is question number one. And the question number two is because by taking the name Corona, a huge scam is being taken part in the community of doctors. So, a company enters into the doctors group and conducts a webinar. It advocates that Dr. G, you purchase this particular machine, otherwise your hospital will be fully contaminated. You purchase this particular chemical, otherwise the hospital will be fully contaminated. So because of all these things accumulated, the initial burden on the single doctored hospital is getting up to 7 lakhs. Immediately we have to purchase the chemicals and machines of 7 lakhs. So obviously this burden is going to be put on the heads of the patients. And believe it or not, the Ahmedabad Dental Association revised its treatment chart, and all of a sudden 4 times the treatment cost increased nowadays, because in order to purchase these machineries and chemicals. So my thing is, as a company persons, you please advocate the government, stating that government has to release the items which are to be purchased by the specialty wise. Second one is, before entering into the hospital, the patient has to be screened through the telemedicine. Then only after medical screening, only the hospital, the patient has to be stepped into the hospital. that most important thing is the COVID test facilities should be handed over to the private labs so that the screening will be done and the purchase of this whole 7 lakhs, 8 lakhs things will be abolished.
Yeah, but yeah, I think Gauri Shankar ji will leave it there because he's not government, right? He's developing vaccines.
He can advocate so that he can advocate.
I mean, let's see. We'll hear him out. Yeah.
We as vaccine manufacturers also are going through. I mean, this is a phase where earlier now all our employee buses have to be sanitized 3 times a day. So this is a process that everybody is going through, and I think after some time when there is a lesser incidence of everything, I think slowly all this will start coming back to normal.
Yeah. Okay.
And regarding the time frame that you asked, like our time frame for the COVID-19 vaccine is going to take 15 months.
Okay, that's great. I mean, at least we have some hope at the end of the tunnel.
I can tell you the fact because we are not a listed company, so I don't have to play the market and tell you a very, very aggressive timeline. And then
that's great, fantastic. Yeah, Indira ji, please go ahead, madam.
So actually, we have almost eradicated polio and smallpox. I think our country is more progressive compared to Pakistan and some of the Western countries. Still, they have a taboo, faith-based taboo on vaccinations. They do, most of them, they reject. So I think some of the population, not most. And then there is another thing also, if some of these vaccination shots are taken, children get autism. Is it a myth or correct? And are we more progressive than the other countries? Because our country accepted vaccination fully and wholly without any such faith-based taboo.
Yeah, madam, as you rightly said, today polio remains in only 3 countries. And partly, other than the religious reason, they also say like access is also difficult in some, especially where there's a lot of terror activities, and it's very difficult to access and immunize children in some parts. And they cite that as one of the reasons why that's happening. And in terms of autism, I think there's already a lot of science which has come through which says that there's no connect between vaccination and autism.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons why all, otherwise, if there's still any lingering of doubt, then we wouldn't go through this whole national vaccination program.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Thank you. Yeah. DS Murthy ji. DS Murthy garu, please go ahead. Yeah. You have to unmute at your end. Yeah.
Sir, is it audible?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Actually, we are very fortunate that we have received the very not that serious virulent type of strain. We have received the virus. But here in India, the administrative responsibility of the health system are shared by the central government and state government, which is lacking infrastructure of a public health department which could monitor, especially at this junctions. So how can we suggest to tackle this kind of situation? Basically, most efficient are the doctors are less involved to tackle this kind of diseases rather than the political system. How will you suggest that?
So actually, I'm not an expert in these things. There are some other doctors who are here within this group who can answer this.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Anil Sadanand ji.
Good evening, sir. I'm Anil's son. Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening. Yeah, I have 2 technical questions for Dr. Anand Kumar. The first one is, what are the complications when you're developing a virus-based vaccine? What are the complicational differences from protozoan or bacterial or any other pathogen-based vaccine?
The higher the order, the higher the difficulty.
Okay.
Yeah.
And another question I have is,
especially if you have to have immunity against a worm, which is so it's much more trickier.
okay. Another question which comes from that is, when can't we collect antibodies from COVID-19 patients who have recovered and make a vaccine from that? Because their antibodies will still be present in their blood and plasma.
That's not called a vaccine. That's the plasma therapy that you're talking about.
Okay.
I think, see, first of all, the response of antibodies and the strength of those. See, first is we haven't even understood what is the protective antibody titer that should remain in an individual. So the fact that merely we collect recovered person's blood and separate the plasma and administer without even measuring any specific quantities, it's going to be a bit tricky. But I think there are some people who are insisting that we try this out.
Sir, one more question, sir. Like we have this IIT and IIS, the engineering marvels, like that, as you were mentioning, like can't we have something like in line of that in for these vaccines, for vaccine development, what we like the Oxford ventures or the Harvard ventures into it, like that? Can't we have one in India?
There are I mean, totally, as I said, for a totally new vaccine, that level of academic we haven't seen yet here. But there are, I mean, we have collaborated with Indian Institute of Science, and our hepatitis B vaccine technology came from Indian Institute of Science.
Okay, sir, one more last question, sir. Now we've been having a lot of radiations because of this technology. Can't we foresee the problems in future where we're going to have some sort of a diseases? Can't we have any sort of a vaccine right now? Can't we start developing it due to this radiation?
There are over 1,000 organisms which can cause disease. It all depends on an opportune moment. They may appear like as if normal flora, but if the conditions are favorable, then they also can turn deadly. So there's no fun in developing 1,000 vaccines and then probably the entire lifetime we have to take vaccines only. Like so, we cannot take that approach as to. So when it comes, I mean, it's always like this. You know, when it comes, we just have to handle that organism, and then using that organism only we can develop a vaccine.
Thank you so much.
I mean, having you said that we can't be taking vaccines all life. It seems there's a lot of discourse in the nation in terms of maybe something our ancestors did right. They knew how to handle this. Like even in your presentation, you spoke about the preventive part of it, right? The Western school seems to be more of disease management or disease control rather than prevention. They seem to be slowly waking up to it. But though you are a microbiology scientist, you're also an Indian. So how do you look at these two worlds? I mean, how do you see, was there wisdom in what they did? How do you compare it with the fight that is going on right now?
See, this whole thing, I mean, this is all just my own views on this. There's no, see, when we say in the olden times, like everything probably was totally different to the present times. Like we had clean air, clean rivers. So a lot of things was possible at that time. And now given this current state of environment that we are living in, then probably these many insects and there was no global warming of this nature and there was no arthropod-borne diseases. So I mean, I think at every time point, like we are living in this present moment. I mean, in the earlier days it was very probably all the rivers were clean. So if you just drank water from a particular river, you could, it would give you some kind of a remedy. But in the present situation, like those things all are don't exist anymore, right? I mean, all this greed, and we've just ruined our environment so much that whether all these things would apply to this kind of world that we are living in would be a big question.
Yeah, but what about the practices?
Like, even good things like, say, we ourselves at various time points kept changing. Ghee was meant to be good. Suddenly we talked about cholesterol for a couple of decades, and then we stopped eating that. Now, if all of us want to eat ghee, then there's so much of adulteration in the market that nobody knows what is good ghee. And so I think, yeah, like it's very difficult to see what was done in the earlier years, because that environment was totally different to what we are living now. It was much more cleaner and nicer, maybe.
Okay. What about the practices they suggested? You know, in terms of physical distancing, that was practiced in many houses, which.
Yeah, I mean, probably. We seem to everything that today that we are following with this, even this namaste, keeping the footwear outside the house. When you went to a salon, you come back and you take a bath before you do anything else. I mean, these are all, very good things.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Then we'll go to Yagnanaranji.
Hello.
Yeah, Yagnanaranji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Andy.
The development of pharmaceutical industries in Hyderabad is basically roots from IDPL, which started as R&D unit for bulk drugs. That gave all the what you call formulas and other things for this private pharmaceutical industry. But what I observed was private pharmaceutical industries are not interested in R&D sector except those which gives them profits, isn't it? So rather than closing down IDPL like big industries, what you call pharmaceutical industries or research labs, government can utilize them for developing certain medicines which are not having a commercial value. Let us say one industry was there in 40, 50 years back, which was developing that leprosy drugs. That industry was closed because there is no market. What I mean to say is public sector always gives the what you call the cheapest solution for developing a drug. That's my opinion. What you say on that?
As I understand, are you saying that we are spending less on R&D?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And public sector is best in R&D. What is your opinion?
Currently, in our vaccine industry, not much of public sector, like government-owned companies are very few, sir. In fact, hardly there are only 2 entities which make vaccines, that too very small quantities.
But what I mean, IDPL was first in India to develop bulk drugs.
Yeah.
That gave rise to all the pharmaceutical industries around Hyderabad. Isn't it? What I'm telling, even electronics or anything.
But ultimately, if it is not able to sustain, then all other
only because of things what earlier we were talking about corruption, honesty, all these things. Those research scholars have come out and started their own units. They have become competitors to only mother unit.
The thing is, we have to, not just create, sir, but also we have to create an environment that allows it to be sustainable, and so that it exists and competes with any other entity. That's important.
I think, Yagnanaranji, you answered it yourself. While you were advocating for public sector to be the best, on the second side, you are saying it is corrupt and so it died.
No, not like that. Not like that.
By nature, public sector will end up with some kind of a corruption. So it is safer to go with somebody, who has the entrepreneurship, who's looking at, some kind of a focus on the subject. Then you could have regulations. You could have regulatory mechanism where you don't allow them to overcharge or try to do something funny. That you can have it. But if government gets into it, all the bureaucracy come in, and then at some point in time there is going to be corruption, there is going to be inefficiency, which will drag it out.
What if the government should not close to such units? What if the chloroquine, let us say chloroquine, it is developed from a bark of a tree. Okay, that was used in Java and Indonesia earlier as a traditional medicine. Then they have developed from biological to chemical compound. That chloroquine now they hydroxyl chloroquine, it has become commercialized. Okay, from traditional to it has become commercialized. But what I'm telling you, government research labs only can do that risky job. So government should make them alive rather than closing down.
Well, you come from government, so obviously your loyalties are there, I can understand. But government should not be in the business of business. Government should get out. Government should be only in the business of governing the country and law and order, security. They should get out of every single business. So that is even Prime Minister Modi said that. So I understand, all these institutions were created during the Nehruvian era. They all need to be buried, and government should get out of all this.
ICMR, ICR,
all of that, all government institutions that get out.
Giridharji, just if you don't mind, I'll just take one question last, and then I have another one to attend to.
Okay. We do have a last question only. Abhinandan ji, please go ahead. Yeah. You are unmuted. You have muted it.
Yeah. Sir, when you develop a vaccine, you have to go through animal trials first, and then you have to go through human trials. So what I wanted to ask, there was a lot of news about human trials being conducted in and around Hyderabad because of poverty and access of people here. That's why you have 6 large, India's top vaccine manufacturers in Hyderabad, because you get human trial people here. What is it true? First question. Second question is, if you do conduct on them, do you insure them, and do you provide, if there is a R&D cost, do they absorb all the, you take care of them?
Sir,
on a humanity.
Let me answer this question. That is a false thing to say that the companies started in Hyderabad because very cost-effective volunteers were available in Hyderabad. That is that's I've never heard this before in my life, but let me tell you, it is a fact that a lot of animal studies are done prior to coming to human studies. In human studies also, it's done in various phases. It's done as a phase 1 is done to determine safety, where a very small number of people are used. Then you determine efficacy, where you try 2 different or 3 different doses. Then you do a large scale trial. And today, let me tell you, there's a lot of regulations which have come as far as clinical trials in India are concerned. Ethics is very important in our country now, and all trials have to be done in multiple centers. There are a lot of vaccines that we are developing where trials are being done in 10 centers across India. So the thing that because this is available in Hyderabad, we do in Hyderabad. It's just we have to do all over the country in multiple centers. So that's a misinformation, sir. That's not true.
Thank you, sir. I just want.
Yeah, Abhinandan Reddy ji, see, the point is you going to have different populations react differently, right? People in the north they have a different way of reacting to a drug, and people in the south they have different. There are differences in the way populations react. So they can't confine to just Hyderabad and say we have released a drug. It doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, we have to do at least in 10 centers, sir. Like multiple centers have to be done.
Yeah. So what is your next phase of growth? Right now you are here. Would you want to expand beyond India? You want to go to somewhere else, or you would be confined to Indian territory? That's your mandate, or how do you want to do it?
We're already exporting to 45 countries from here. As I said, currently our next phase would be we have a very strong R&D pipeline. And I said that whatever vaccines which are being supplied to the government, I've shown you the prices that we supply to the government. It's very cost-effective prices. But still in the retail business, we see that the multinational companies are selling at very, very high prices. And we have a very, very strong R&D pipeline. And we want to make sure that we develop these vaccines pretty quick and make it available to the common public. The other thing is wherever our strengths are, like today we are the largest manufacturer of rabies vaccine in the world. So we are also consolidating our business, expanding capacities, producing in order to increase our capacities more, so that we can produce it and sell it at a cost-effective price.
Great, fantastic. That was a wonderful talk, Anand Kumar ji. We wish you all the very best to come out with solutions for Chinese virus at the earliest. And we are all with you, and we hope to see that India is disease-free and some kind of normalcy is restored back. And we back on you and your team for giving something back to this country pretty soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. I mean, I just want to end up here saying that we are a very autonomous entity, and one thing is like we drive business very hard, in the sense that we drive a lot of efficiency into our organization. At the same time, unfortunately today, the only measure of efficiency in any entity, business entity, is the profit it makes. But we have all the freedom to do whatever we want with the profits that we make. We have plowed considerably into R&D and also to create more capacities. We are also very actively involved in various CSR activities. We have the liberty, because we are not privately owned. We have adopted various schools, government schools around our manufacturing plants. Our intention is to take a government school, convert it, other than the teacher's salary, just create adequate infrastructure like a private school. We provide all uniforms, bags, clothes, everything. So in Karakapatla village, where our second plant in Hyderabad is located, the school had a strength of 160 pupils, and now after we took that school, it's gone to 420 in 3 years. So that's, and we provide a lot of things to the children there, and that school also has won various accolades. Similarly, we are a part of the National Foundation for Nutrition, where we provide nearly about 1,800 students, especially in government schools. We provide them daily flavored fortified milk. So that way, and as a part of the contribution to the PM's fund, we gave 2 crore 33 lakhs. I mean, of that 2 crore 33 lakhs, 33 lakhs came from all employee contribution. Other than that, yesterday, day before yesterday, I met our Honorable CM KCR Garu, and we presented him with 1 crore rupees as a part of the state relief fund as well. So with these words, I just want to thank you all for patiently listening to me, and wherever possible, I tried to answer all the questions. And I mean, it has been quite a very good interaction with all of you. Wish you all good luck and stay safe. And I'm sure we all would overcome whatever this COVID menace that is happening now, and we'll all emerge victorious. With these words, I would wish you all good luck. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and wish you all the very best. And we would be very proud to see our own Indian Immunologicals, stand up and be counted in the fight against this Chinese virus. Thank you, sir. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Namaste. Bharat Mata Ki Jai.